Jason here with Dirt Race Life. Alright, this is our second episode for our 2024 Metric Crate Racing Street Stock build. Alright, so you see, I got the engine sitting up here. Don't worry, I have not actually mounted it yet. That's what this episode is. We're going to mount this engine up. Now, I've just set it up here. I've still got it safely held here with the cherry picker, but I want to just show y'all how I do this. And especially when you're not going to mount an engine completely like flush and flat and neutral, I think this is probably the best way to do it. And what I do is I just set the engine up here, and I've got wood shims. I've got 1.5 inches of wood blocks underneath it between the oil pan and the cross member. And then I turn around and I've got wood shims. I left the rear cross member in the frame right now. That's coming out. I float the rear transmission. I use the motor plate, but I just left it in right now to have somewhere to hold the engine securely while I'm mounted up. Now this engine's not going in flat and level. Here's what I'm doing. I'm putting this engine 3 degrees rearward and 2 degrees to the left side. And that's because this car at attitude is always going to be up on its nose. It's always going to be on its right front. And so we're going to set the engine over to the left and rearward so that our carburetor and oil pan and stuff are not as far over at attitude. They're still going to be over some, but in general, I'm going to be flatter with how the engine is running by doing that. I don't want to have them so much that like the engine's actually got problems when the car is sitting over in that direction. But this is a good move for me. This is very common to do this on these cars that run like this, pinned down on the right front all the time. Now, the way I went about doing it, because it's like, well, how do you figure out exactly where to get the engine? Well, there's a couple of different measurements that all came together for me to like get this engine in here. Now, one of them is that on this engine, the #1 spark plug can't be further back than the ball joints on the engine. Well, that's a real easy one to do because all I'm doing here is just taking a measurement from a fixed point at the rear here up to the ball joint, and I'm 92 inches from where that cross member is back there. And then I can just measure here to make sure that I'm not actually sitting rearward. And of course, our rules is on the #1, so it's on the other side because there is an offset difference between the two sides. So over there, what I did is I set the engine 1/2 inch forward of that maximum. So that's how I did that. I gave myself a little bit of breathing room. And the other big one is that by me rolling the engine over, my motor mounts are sitting different between the two sides. And so the whole engine doesn't look like it's sitting in the center of the car anymore. And this is a real important point. And so, like, when we turn and rotate this engine, we're rotating it along the crankshaft. So the top of the engine is moving, you know, to the left side, and that's a real important thing to remember. You're not centering the engine up here, you're centering the engine on the crankshaft. And so like if you're completely flat in the car, you're fine. You could measure, you know, from the edges of the head or the side of the block or the motor mount, it's fine. When you start rotating your engine sideways, that goes out the window, y'all. Here's the way I do it. Fixed point. Like me, you know, we put the jig on in the last episode, we mounted the frame up, made sure that it was all completely exactly in the center of our jig. So it's real easy for me to just bump my tape measure against my harmonic balancer on each side and get a measurement, you know, from the harmonic balancer to my jig on this side to the harmonic balancer on the other side. And then what I do is I do the same thing back here at the tail. I take a measurement on the tail shaft back to the jig on each side. And so that's the center line where the crankshaft goes all the way through to the drive shaft. So when we rotate the engine, we're rotating it along that center. And so the whole engine leaning over, you know, we're no longer getting messed up by the head being closer to this side and further away from that side because the engine is still sitting in the center of the car. Rearward wise, I just take and I shim up the front of the engine, and then I'm just stacking in wood shims at the rear until I got that 3 degrees of rear pitch sitting back. And so the engine is in line, pointing downhill towards the rear of the car. Doesn't create a drivetrain problem at all with the car whatsoever. It's just going to be pointed right back towards the rear end of the car. And like with this engine, the way I did it, you know, I've actually got like a screwdriver that I just drove in on the wood wedge blocks on one side and just shimmed it up. You know, I'll drive in screwdrivers or pieces of wood. I've got like some wood remnants here where I've cut off some strips and kind of drove in until I just got it right where I wanted. And then what I did was I just welded in some little legs just to make the engine not rock around. And so now I've got it where it's stable, it's not moving around. And then at that point, we're ready to put the mounts on. So if you watched our first street stock build that we did 2 years ago, you saw me make these. I'll show you a quick clip right here from where I was putting these together and how I do it. Here's what we're doing. We're going to use a lug nut for the nut. The reason for that is because this is going to be your highest grade ability to hold pressure and torque that is accessible and inexpensive. Now I've got some 1-inch, half-inch 20s, 1 inch as far as the size of the outside of the nut. I got these on a car years ago. They were thrown in or something, or someone had still had their stock studs on the patterns or something. So I've got these. You don't have to use these. This is a regular, like you get at just your parts store, half-inch 20. That's like 3/4 inch, and this is fine. You know, you could use this, and I'll show you. What I'm going to use here is a washer. This is a SAE 5/8 washer, and it's actually a little bigger than a 5/8. It's probably 3/4 inch hole, but the cone sits into the hole. And then the flange is large enough, and this is thick enough. Since this is an SAE, this is a higher grade of washer. And so what we do is we weld the lug nut into the washer, and then we turn around and we weld the washer into the tube, and then that makes the stand. The way I do this is I'm going to take a 1/2-inch 20 donor, and you see I've got a nut on it, and I'm going to put it together. And this is the first part. So the first thing we do is we want to get the nut welded onto the washer. I have not found a simpler, less expensive way to build a very robust engine mount, and it is robust. I mean, this is great. All right, so we run that down. It's centered, and because it's a lug nut, it's cone. See, it's going to center into the washer. It's going to square itself up. You know, so it's perfect for this. So run that down. We're gonna MIG that up all the way around on the inside, and then we'll drop it into the tube. Nothing to it. I was trying to make sure that I didn't get my weld way out on the edge of that washer, because, cool off there, buddy. So that's going into that tube. That is it. So 1/2-inch 20 sitting flat, got a washer face. Of course, we want a flat. That way, when we put the motor in, the motor mounts just sit on top of it. We can slide the engine dowel pins into our rear mount. So that's important. That's the reason you don't want studs sticking up. So if you think about it, if you're using a mid plate and you've got a stud sticking up here, so if you just like weld a bolt on, you're like, I'm just going to sit down on this bolt and put a nut on it because that'll be easy. No, it won't. Because what happens is that now you have to sit it up over those bolts to drop the motor in, but you've got dowel pins, you know, and you know that need to slide straight back into a mid plate. And so, bad combination. This is the way you want to do it. Like you saw there, really simple with just a nut in behind that washer. And of course, that's a lug nut like for a wheel stud. So really tough stuff. These work really good. I like them because the engine just sits down on it and you put the bolt in. Super easy to get your motor in, get the bolt started. You're not fighting with it. You know, because like me working by myself, I can get an engine in and out by myself using a system like this right here. Now, you notice 2 different links. Well, that's because we got the engine rolled way over to the left side. And the way we're going to do this, super simple. Of course, I got the engine where it won't move. I've already trimmed this and got it ready to go. And then I'm just going to take and put it in here and bolt it up. And what I'll do is I'll just spot both sides and then I'll weld them up. And so I'm just taking, hold that joker right in there, and make sure when you do this that you're going to clear your line on your fuel pump. I almost retimed this ProCam fuel pump to move over just a little bit, but it's going to work out where that I've got room. I was very close. I was right on the bubble of retiming this thing. When I say retiming, taking all these bolts out and turning the fuel pump. I've had to do that before, but I think this one's going to be okay. It was very close on my other engine. It's going to be very close on this one, but it works out better when I'm going straight forward and straight back to have those fuel lines just be straight. And they're right on the edge. Where this works out with sitting this engine back, you see this mount is just right on this corner of this cross member, which is actually a good thing. That's a really good stout spot for it to be. If it was out in the middle of the cross member, it would actually come near bending that down or fatiguing it over time. But on this corner where all this folds come together, that's a stout spot. I won't need to add any extra bracing. It's kind of off the edge, but there is plenty of beefy steel there to hold that. I am not concerned with that sitting on the edge. It's a big 1/4-inch plate that I've got there on the bottom of that tube. So there's plenty there to weld. I am not concerned at all with that. So same deal over here, just a lot shorter. And you see, look, this mount is like out further over this cross member right here. So it can really fool you if you don't know what's going on, if you're not taking that measurement off that center. When you start leaning an engine, it can really mess you up. And what can happen is if you're paying attention to this stuff as you turn the engine, you'll actually end up moving your engine to the right. And so then your crankshaft and drive shaft and stuff won't actually be in alignment in the center of the car anymore. It's not necessarily a problem. Lots of cars out there that run just fine like that. But it's like things won't line up and you'll be wondering why. And it'll be because you made a mistake early on in your build right here is how that happens. So it's just something to kind of pay attention to. And as long as you're aware of it and you know kind of how it works, then you won't make that mistake. One of them things. That'll be enough. Hold it in place. And now that I got those mounted there, I can knock that out. Like I said, that was just to keep that engine from moving around on me. I'm going to kind of bend that. Flatten that out where I can get me a good weld. This one right here, I'm not going to have to do any fill or anything. That thing's just going to take a bead all the way around. It's going to be money. Get that other side knocked loose over there. There we go. We are good to go. Oh yeah, this thing is crying, please weld me. All right, so I'll go halfway around on both of these, and then I'll just unbolt, lift the engine up out of the way, finish welding this up good and solid, and that way we can put it back in. We're gonna leave the engine in while we're doing the build. We're gonna do this a little bit different. I do not want to create a scenario where I'm fighting with any of my bars or tubes or anything on this. I was a little bit off on my last build, and it was a little bit tight getting my valve covers off and changing out some of my valve springs and stuff. So I want to get this one right for sure. So headers and everything in while I'm doing the build on this one. So as you can see, I was really serious about needing all of the parts off of this car. And it's not just like the cost, but it's also, you know, just like the speed as far as like this plate right here. I know I can put this in place and it gets all of that like taken care of and lined up, and it's something to weld onto. So I'm shaving time by doing this as well. So me scrapping this car out, like, it's got a couple of purposes. I'm trying to be able to get this car up and going really fast. Still going to be out a lot of money on new parts. Check out dirtracelife.com. I'm starting to assemble a list of the things that we're going to have to buy. I'm looking for help on those through sponsorship. So I've got like the items I'm starting to list out. I'm going to have everything from like just simply like needing new ball joints and stuff, and like upper control arms, all the way to like we're putting a quick change into this car as well. And so we're going to try to, you know, where we can get some help. If you want to jump on board as a sponsorship for some of these parts, when we do up our graphics on the car, we're going to put everybody's name on it. We're going to do shout outs on the channel and stuff. So check that out if you want to get involved. Help us get this car built quick. So this part's actually going to get done in 2 phases. I need to get this cross member out because I've got some X bracing and stuff that's going in here. This cross member needs to go, but I got to be able to hold the engine up because I want it in during the build. So I'm putting in my mid plate mounts, but you see I just rough cut them, and I just cut that all the way out because I know it's going to get trimmed back some from where it was. The tubes that are going to come in here are going to go down right in this corner and be on here. So I've got plenty of plate here, but I just left it long, and I'm not ready to put that tube in because the way I want to do it is I want to put my bay bar in and work out the tube position with the bay bar. You know, I don't want to just like put this bar tube up through here and just kind of hope it works out. All right, so I think the quick steer will be in the right spot, same as the other car. Now this has come down a little bit, and it's moved in just a hair, but I've got a double joint here that's going to go, you know, on my steering sector itself. I've got another U-joint here, I've got another U-joint here. I think it's going to work out great. If I end up having to move it, you know, I'll cry a little bit. We'll show it on film. It'll be one of those, well, that didn't work out type of deals. But I believe it's going to work out. I believe it's going to be fine for us and everything. So I'm going to bolt this up, and then I'm just going to strut it onto my jig where the cross member can come out. This is the last part of this video. We were just mounting up the engine in this one, because we've got to start putting some tubes on this car. I'm ready. All right, so get this thing bolted down. There we go. Get tight. And I'm just going to put an upright in a position where it can just stay there, and then I can trim that, put the tube in, and then when I get all that figured out, then I can just pull the upright out, and we'll all be happy. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to literally throw that in there just like that down to the jig. That way it's out of the way, and that main tube that we're going to end up with going up to the bay bar, it's going to be happy. I probably need to wear a welding helmet to do this though. Alright. I hereby declare that the position right. Hang on. Got to get it perfect with this eyeball here. Right there. All right. Now, plug transmission, pull the cross member out, yada, 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 all that good stuff. So what do you think? Pretty quick way to do it. Overall, total time I've spent here, about 3 hours, including me taking a tape measure and like taking a crowbar and kind of sliding the engine around on the wood shims, holding it in place. Like really, about 3 hours is all I spent here, y'all. Now that didn't include me obviously fabricating out, you know, these mounts and stuff. I'd have more time there. That's why I'm cannibalizing everything off my other car. But just by far, I think this is the easiest way to do it. Just get the engine in there, shim it all up, and then just weld in your mounts around it. And then you're there. You've got it exactly where you want it. Hey, on my first episode of our new build here, y'all sent me a message loud and clear. I was just blown away by how many people jumped up and subscribed in that video. Thank you. It was sending me a clear message. You want to see the build videos on building street stocks. I got you. I hear you. On this build right here, we're going to try to make the videos 20 to 30 minutes a piece. Do one small part of it. Get it knocked out, and then move on to the next one where we can just get video one right after another. Overall, I'm looking for feedback, of course. Really excited about it. Can you tell I don't have the flu anymore? Definitely feeling better. Ready to get some roll cage tubing on this car. See you next time.